2006 was going to be an important year for Marvel as their biggest competitor was about to make a big return to the big screen. With so much hype and controversy as the Man of Steel himself was about to make his return to film after being out of the spotlight for almost 20 years. The bigger news was the fact that this new incarnation of Superman would have a director taken from Fox and Marvel. With the success of the X-Men films, director Bryan Singer chose to sign on with DC to direct Superman Returns. The third X-Men film would be hitting theaters a few weeks prior to kick off the summer season with X-Men The Last Stand. With all the big names returning, the third X-Men film would be helmed by Brett Ratner, and it would also be one of the highest budgeted films to date with a total of $210 million. The film would take on three popular stories in the X-Men comics and introduce some new characters, featuring actors such as Ellen Page, Kelsey Grammer, and Vinnie Jones. While there was a great deal of anticipation and promise, X-Men The Last Stand would end up being a disappointment. The film would still be successful at the box office and even garner some positive reviews, but most found that the film was too crowded with too many different stories and too many different characters, along with one of the most popular X-Men stories in the comics getting butchered. Luckily, Marvel would see a breath of relief as Superman Returns would receive a similar reception. Some would love it, while others would despise it, and in the end, both competitors would break even with the potential of each of their respective franchises. While DC felt the reception was lackluster, they would go back to the drawing board in regards to feature films and allow their animation department with Bruce Timm as they began their line of direct-to-DVD animated films. Marvel would begin the same with their own line of animated films featuring heroes like the Avengers, Hulk, and even Doctor Strange, while still focusing on their big-budget film projects. 2007 would see two more of their popular film franchises return to the big screen. Tobey Maguire would don the costume once again in Spider-Man 3. Like X-Men's third installment, the marketing was based on a darker, more dramatic tone and featured one of the most beloved comic book stories amongst the fans, the Black Costume Saga. Adding talent like Thomas Hayden Church and That 70s Show's Topher Grace, Spider-Man would go up against new enemies like the Sandman and fan-favorite Venom, as well as see the return of the Green Goblin, with James Franco's Harry Osborn becoming the villain that fans were waiting for. For Spider-Man 3, the results were disastrous. Once again, with too many plots and not enough substance, while some critics will find this film enjoyable along with big box office numbers thanks to anticipation, the true fans would see one of the most powerful heroes of comic book lore fall. The Fantastic Four would be the next on the decline with their franchise sequel Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. While the first film did not get the praises of the other Marvel film franchises, this one once again was met with much anticipation thanks to a plot and a hopeful big screen debut of Galactus. The godlike character was reduced to nothing but shadows in a cosmic windstorm, and the film would be an instant flop. With plans for a third film, which was to revolve around Thing's girlfriend and introduce a well-known villain known as the Puppet Master, the reaction to Rise of the Silver Surfer immediately caused Fox to shut down production, and another Marvel film franchise was met with a bitter end. Crazy enough, this would only be a bump in the road for Marvel, who was now working on numerous studio films to bring their characters to the movie screens around the world. 2008 would show no signs of Marvel stopping, and with Warner Brothers and DC already working on the new Batman reboot, Marvel was hard at work with their next big film franchise, and it was going to be something that not even the fans would have ever seen coming. Marvel hero would blast himself onto the big screen in the spring of 2008 as Marvel Studios would team up with Paramount to release Iron Man. With director and prestigious actor Jon Favreau and the recent comeback king Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man would bring fans back to the glory days of the successful Marvel films. A strong origin story, great character development, and a smart sense of humor, Iron Man would be a hit for Marvel, but it would be a small scene at the end of the film's credits that would shock the movie-going public. Tony Stark would return to his Malibu home to find a strange figure in his house questioning his ideas of being a hero. This man was played by Samuel L. Jackson, and it would be none other than Nick Fury, the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., asking if Iron Man would be interested in the Avengers Initiative. The minute those words were dropped, the comic book collective screamed with delight in hopes for sequels and new comic book characters like never before. The call would be answered with the second Marvel film, and it would be a new rebooted Hulk film called The Incredible Hulk. Not many fans were even aware that this film was coming into theaters after the disaster of the 2003 film. The Louis Leterrier directed film arrived under the radar. It wasn't a retold origin story, nor did it feel like a straight-up sequel, but it was rich in character, improved special effects, and had a very strong ensemble cast. The film even had some nods to the classic television show from the late 1970s, including the sad song. While it didn't get the critical response as Iron Man did, there were many that found this film to be a serious improvement, and at the end of the film, goers were met with another surprise as Robert Downey Jr. would make his appearance, talking about putting a team together with the character General Thunderbolt Ross, played by William Hurt. Marvel indeed made a statement connecting the two films together, and Marvel was on the verge of changing the movie-going experience forever. The concept of individual films developing their heroes only to unite them in one big film was something that no one had ever done before. In the eyes of the average comic book fan, crossover stories were always a treat. However, that very same summer, Marvel would receive the ultimate test.
Gather round, people, wherever you roam.
2 months after Marvel would reveal its new film project, Warner Brothers and DC would bring Batman back to movie theaters with the help of Christopher Nolan. The Dark Knight would bring fans back into the new dark world that was created in 2005 with Batman Begins. Batman would face off against his arch-nemesis, the Joker, with an astounding portrayal by Heath Ledger. This Joker was vile, creepy, and overall terrifying, as he would test the Dark Knight to see just how far he would go to stand with the forces of good. The movie world was stunned, and everyone had almost forgotten that Marvel was about to embark on a game-changing journey. The Dark Knight shattered the box office, taking in over $500,000 domestically, and even giving Heath Ledger a posthumous Oscar, the first Academy Award ever in acting to be given to a comic book film. Seeing the success of The Dark Knight raised the bar extremely high, and Marvel knew that they were going to have to answer back. Based on the recent rebooting, Marvel felt that it would be time to bring back some of their familiar faces. In 2009, Hugh Jackman would return as everyone's favorite animal in X-Men Origins Wolverine. This would give the fans a look into Wolverine's beginnings and how he would eventually join the X-Men. It also gave the fans a look into his rivalry with his arch-nemesis Sabretooth, who was played by Lev Schreiber. The film did not get the reception that Marvel wanted. Rather, most critics referred to it as just okay. The others looked to this film as a way to keep the X-Men franchise on life support, as people were getting a bit tired of seeing all of these X-Men, though it seemed as a whole fans were starting to drift away from the comic book film. Even with the earlier release in 2009 of Zack Snyder's film Watchmen, DC was also starting to feel the burn. It seemed that there were two types of fans when it came to comic book films: the overall moviegoer and the fanboy. If you want to please both, you would obviously displease the other, and Marvel felt that with their new direction, it would be the average moviegoer that would bring them the success. 2010 would see Iron Man's return to the big screen with an anticipated sequel. The film would see Iron Man take on a villain known as Whiplash, played by Mickey Rourke, while his alter ego Tony Stark would take on his fellow business competitor Justin Hammer, played by Sam Rockwell. Since Tony had announced to the world that he was Iron Man, it wouldn't be too long until both the villains united against him as well. The film would see a change as Terrence Howard, who played Tony's friend James Rhodes, was replaced by Don Cheadle, who would also become the Marvel hero War Machine. Another new face would be Black Widow, played by the popular actress Scarlett Johansson. The film would also get a little deeper into the bigger plot, as fans were now to make a routine of staying after the credits to see the hidden surprises. Iron Man 2 would be a monetary success, but most fans would look at it as just an average comic book film. Marvel would then officially announce that this film was the third in what was known as the first wave of Marvel Studios films. No matter how good or how bad these films were, they would be introducing new characters, and in 2012, they would all be uniting in an Avengers film. The world now knowing of the creation of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, fans will be treated with many films leading up to the big climatic assembly. In 2011, the world would see the first film appearance of the God of Thunder, Thor. Played by unknown Aussie actor Chris Hemsworth, the film would show the fans of the Marvel films a look into the other dimensions of the universe. With a cast including Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, and Sir Anthony Hopkins, Thor would be a story of self-discovery as the brash Thor would learn true responsibility of being a god and being able to wield his mighty hammer once again. Thor was met with great reception as it was a fun and exciting film along with a strong and enjoyable villain in Tom Hiddleston's Loki. The film also previewed the fact that Loki was not going to be a brush-aside villain, but rather a more powerful villainous force in an ever-growing story. That very same year, director Matthew Vaughn, coming off of the success of another comic book film, Kick-Ass, would be tapped to direct the new X-Men film. Fox's X-Men First Class would now show the beginnings of the X-Men, as well as seeing the relationship between Professor Xavier and Magneto rise and fall. Along with many links to the original films, this reinvented X-Men film would finally give the X-Men relevancy once again, as it was given a warm welcome to the franchise. The next Marvel Cinematic Universe film would be one that finally gave relevancy to a hero whose previous attempts at big screen stardom were met with dismay. Captain America, the First Avenger, would give this hero the film that he deserved for so long. Chris Evans would don the persona of Steve Rogers, already with the Fantastic Four under his belt. Marvel fans would be taken back to World War II and see an incapable soldier prove everyone wrong with his strong heart being asked to become a super soldier to help the Allies. Along with Chris Evans, Hugo Weaving would play the Red Skull, and a new face, Haley Atwell, would play Captain America's love interest, Peggy Carter. Another new face, Sebastian Stan, would play Captain America's best friend, Bucky Barnes. Captain America, the First Avenger, earned $4 million in midnight showings, outgrossing other 2011 original superhero films like Thor, X-Men First Class, and even DC's Green Lantern. The pieces were in place, and the fans were eagerly awaiting the film that was hinted 5 years prior, and in 2012, it was time for movie history to be made.
The world's about to break.
2012 had finally arrived. Whether the apocalypse was going to come or not, everyone was excited for that summer. DC was already preparing for Marvel as they would release their final installment in the Dark Knight trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises. But it was the coming together of some of the greatest heroes in Marvel that everyone was excited for. On May 4th, 2012, it would happen. The Avengers would be called upon by Nick Fury to fight an alien menace that worked out a deal with Thor's stepbrother Loki to invade and conquer Earth. It would go down as a pivotal Battle of New York that would be referenced in future Marvel films. The film would become the third highest grossing film behind Titanic and Avatar, and receive plenty of high praises as the film would break new ground. Not to mention the fact that Marvel 3 years prior was bought by the Walt Disney Company, practically giving Marvel Studios unlimited resources and potential. That year would also see Spider-Man return to the big screen with Sony's The Amazing Spider-Man. Peter Parker would be played by Andrew Garfield and also star Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy and feature a new villain, the Lizard, played by Rhys Ifans. Directed by Mark Webb, the film was met with positive reviews, and many found it to be a much more human story with many layers. Still, people were more excited to find out what would happen with the new Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially with post-credit scenes that the fans received at the end. It was clear that the MCU was just getting started. Marvel Studios was now officially the go-to franchise for Hollywood's best. The films were racking in the cash, and the story was still far from over. The MCU would now not only be the basis for great comic book films, as the new independent studio was looking to future films and beyond.
Find it. Come